I'm about to do, oh, I'm about to do Dr. Coleman's introduction. For those of you who haven't met Dr. Coleman before, don't know her from other social circles, just gonna give you a quick introduction and then pass it over to her. She is the woman of the hour today. Again, I'm just gonna remind everyone, as we start the presentation, if you could mute your microphones, that would be very helpful so that we can catch every ounce of juicy information she's got for us today. So without further ado, I have the great honor of introducing Dr. Coleman. She is a graduate of the Southwest College of Naturopathic Medicine in Phoenix, Arizona. And since childhood, she's had a passion for treating illness in holistic ways, as well as with botanical methods. She has a special interest in liver, gastrointestinal, and autoimmune disorders, although her practice is not limited to that. She practices broad spectrum naturopathic medicine. She is happily married and she has one young son, Andrew, who is the cutest. And she loves to cook, spend time with friends and family, and enjoy the outdoors. I am also proud to say that she is my sister, and I am super proud of her. And I appreciate her partnership as we take care of patients together and build this practice. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Coleman.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Thank you again for joining us. It's so awesome to see everyone here. I'm gonna be sharing my screen with you all, so just give me a moment and we're gonna get right into the presentation. All right, so tonight we're talking about one of the cornerstone topics in naturopathic medicine, which is our gut health. With pretty much every condition that we have to talk about with our patients, we usually talk about the gut. So that's what we're going to be doing tonight. And specifically, we're going to be talking about food sensitivity testing and how it can really help to improve your gut health and just your overall health as well. So as my sister introduced before, I went to McMaster University for my undergrad. I graduated from Southwest College of Naturopathic Medicine in beautiful Arizona. This is it right here. That was from one of my hikes. And this is my husband over here, Sherman, and our son, Andrew. And as she mentioned before, I'm now working at Integrative Interactive Health with her in Mississauga, Ontario. All right, so before we get into it, I have to give you a little disclaimer that, this presentation is purely for educational and informational purposes only. It's not personalized medical advice. It's always best to speak to your family doctor or your naturopath before engaging in any of the recommendations that we speak about here tonight. All right, so tonight, we're going to be covering the topics of food sensitivities versus food allergies. I know that a lot of us have heard these terms kind of floating around, but we aren't quite sure the difference between the two. So we're going to talk about that. Then we're going to go into why the gut is so important in relation to so many other conditions. And with that, we're going to talk about some of those conditions and specifically how food sensitivity testing can help with them. And then last but not least, I'm going to give you some really helpful just lifestyle things that you can do to integrate into your daily life to hopefully improve your gut and overall health. Okay, so what is a food sensitivity? First, to understand that, we have to understand the difference between a food sensitivity, as we said, and a food allergy. So to understand that, I have to give you a little tiny clip of an immunology class, all right? So we're going to be talking about certain players in the immune system called immunoglobulins. So this image in the top right corner here shows us our 5 different types of immunoglobulins that are in our body. So we can also call these immunoglobulins antibodies. I think that's the term that some of you may be more familiar with. So first we have IgG, IgE, IgD, IgM, and IgA. But for tonight, we're only talking about IgG and IgE. So specifically for food sensitivities, we need to know about immunoglobulin G. So with that one, it's what's actually being measured with our food sensitivity reactions. And IgE is what's being measured with our food allergy reactions. So with IgG, there's three main points that I need you to remember, okay? So there's three important things about IgG. First, it's the most abundant of all the immunoglobulins in our body. It actually makes up 80 to 85% of all the immunoglobulins in our blood, and it's responsible for our long-term immunity. The second point about IgG is that it's the only immunoglobulin that can actually cross the placenta. So that's really important because that immunity that is often passed on from mom to baby is from this one immunoglobulin. It's the only one that can pass through the placenta. The third point about IgG that you should know is that it's also able to pass into tissue spaces. So that's going to play a really important role with all the different conditions we're talking about later, because since it can actually get into organ tissue lining, it can actually lead to a lot of the inflammation that we're going to be talking about later. So what's happening in this immune reaction is that IgG forms these complexes. So you can see that it's this Y-shaped antibody here, right? And at the tips of the immunoglobulin is called the antigen binding site. So what an antigen is anything that the body sees as like a foreign enemy. We always like to talk about the immune system as like our defense system or our military. That's how my microbiology teacher always used to explain it. So our antibodies, this immunoglobulin, would bind those enemies or those antigens and form these complexes. So a bunch of them would form together. What's supposed to happen is that another immune cell comes in called macrophages. Macrophages come in kind of like a Pac-Man and will eat up those immune complexes and get rid of those antigens by breaking down that whole complex. The problem arises when the macrophages cannot break down all of those complexes and we have excess of it. So we have excess immunoglobulins bound to these antigens. And what happens is that it embeds into the tissue and then causes that inflammation because there's just too much of it for the macrophages to be able to eat up, right? So that's what's happening with a food sensitivity reaction. So just on our column here, talking about the different points differentiating a food sensitivity is that, it's usually a slower reaction. It can take hours to days for those symptoms to really show up. And so that's why the 3 points about immunoglobulin G, how it's responsible for our long-term immunity is so important, because those symptoms may not come up until 2 or 3 days after we've even eaten that food. So that's why we have to really pay attention to what's going on in our bodies. Food sensitivities are usually causing inflammation in the intestinal lining, and that inflammation then usually leads to gut permeability or leaky gut, which is a thing that some people may have heard of before, wherein the tissue of the gut lining then becomes inflamed and those immune complexes leak out into the bloodstream and get to all of our different organ systems, leading to all the different conditions that we're going to talk about later. All right, so now we're going to talk about food allergies, which I think more people are usually familiar with. It is also an immune reaction, but as we said, it is an IgE antibody immune reaction. So that's what's measured for food allergies. Symptoms would include things like swollen, itchy eyes, sore throat, rash. Oftentimes with a food allergy, you'll actually see a decrease in the person's blood pressure. They may have that panic and distress that you're known to have, or difficulty breathing. Usually a treatment is an EpiPen, and usually it's that more immediate and severe reaction that you'll see with food allergies as opposed to a food sensitivity. Right, so we're going to talk about some foods that are known as a food sensitivity and the most common foods that are known as food allergies. So this list on the left, including wheat and gluten, dairy, corn, soy, egg, processed sugar, nightshade vegetables, artificial colors, sweeteners, flavors, and genetically modified organisms or foods are some of the most common food sensitivities. So those are some of the most common pro-inflammatory foods that you'll see a lot of people react to. And so just touching on some of those, nightshade vegetables are something some of you may not have heard of. So nightshades is a group or family of foods that includes things like tomatoes and bell peppers, eggplant. Those are all a part of the nightshade family, which are all vegetables that we think are usually very healthy, but for some people, oftentimes with a lot of immune conditions especially, we'll see a lot of them that causes a pro-inflammatory response, and it's just not actually a good food for them. Yes, it's a healthy vegetable, but for them it's causing inflammation. So it's important to see out on that food sensitivity test if that's what's happening with you. Another point with the artificial colors, sweeteners, and flavors, a lot of the ones that we have in North America here are not even legal in some other countries because they're actually known neurotoxins. And so a lot of those neurotoxins are what's causing this inflammation and a lot of other concerns and conditions that we'll talk about in a bit. So the food allergy list is, you're probably more familiar with things like peanuts, tree nuts, milk, egg, wheat, soy, fish, and shellfish. So again, just reiterating food sensitivities, what that blood test is measuring is the amount of IgG in the blood. And with a food allergy, it's measuring the amount of IgE in the blood. All right, so I told you all that we're going to be very interactive tonight. So we have a little quiz. You all are going to enter into first year medical school? Sure, first year medical school with me and do a case, all right? So here's our first question. So those that can participate, you can answer this question. It says, the 5-year-old female comes in with complaints of an itchy throat, puffy eyes, and a swollen tongue 10 minutes after eating a peanut butter sandwich. So is this an IgG reaction or an IgE reaction? All right, I'm gonna wait for you all to give that answer. Great, great. You all are doing great so far. I'm gonna give a few more seconds. About 5, 4, get your answers in quick. 3, 2, 1. All right, put down your papers, folks. Here's the answer. All right, so the answer is that this is an IgE reaction or a food allergy. This is most likely a food allergy issue that she's having, right? Because of how quick you see the symptoms come about, the type of symptoms, and that type of food, peanuts, which is very high on the allergenic list, all right? So you have one more question to do, and that will be the end of your quiz tonight. All right, so we have a 52-year-old male. He comes in with complaints of difficulty losing weight, sinusitis, arthritis, and chronic constipation. Is this a food sensitivity or a food allergy? Good job, guys, good job. All right, I'll give you about 5 more seconds to get everyone's answers in. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Great, so most of you got this one right as well. So this is a really good case for food sensitivity testing. So an important note is that any conditions that kind of end in itis, we know that there's some level of inflammation going on usually. And so if that's kind of that root issue that's happening, food sensitivity testing could really be something that's beneficial to you. And so also because of, you know, the type of symptoms and the length of time that they probably take to show up, that's how you know it's most likely a food sensitivity type reaction. All right, great job, everyone. So we're going to move on to our second point. Why is the gut so important? So the gut has many, many things that it has to be responsible for. And as we were talking about with inflammation, inflammation sort of feeds all other maladies. And one of the main organs that's affected by inflammation is usually the gut. It's like that first gateway often from the environment to inside is through our gut. So that's why it's so important. All of us have inflammation going on to some extent, but it can manifest in very different ways. For some people, it's obesity. For some people, it's arthritis. For others, it could even be fibroids. And just one of those things that, we were speaking about earlier is leaky gut syndrome, which is just where the gut wall has been compromised. And that compromise can come from things like stress or environment or different toxins like pesticides, foods, drugs, and the gut just doesn't respond then in the way that it's supposed to. All right. So here are some of the main things that the gut is really responsible for. First off, it actually contains 92% of our neurotransmitters. So a nickname that you can have for the gut is actually the second brain, because those neurotransmitters are so important for so many cognitive processes that we have to do. Another point is that it has 80% of our immune system, and that's, as we said, our defense system. It helps us fight infections. So what's really important is just the gut microbiome, which is just that microbial environment that the gut needs to be really healthy. And that's a whole lecture on its own. I'm sure I'm going to talk about that in another webinar series. But the gut microbiome is so important because without it, that's how you get those recurrent infections all the time, and your body's not able to fight infection as effectively. The other thing is that it has 50%, it does 50% of our hormone modulation. So therefore your mood, your metabolism, a lot of different reproductive things that have to happen, all play a role in how intact that gut lining is and the environment that it has, right? And then the last point is just nutrient absorption, which I think is the first thing most of us usually think about with the gut, but it is just one of the very, very many things that it has to do. So that's why it's so important to address when dealing with other conditions, okay? So we're gonna get into what conditions food sensitivity testing can actually help. Sorry, just 1 second here. All right, so with these that we're going to go into as far as the conditions, I want you to keep track of how many of these, either you or someone that you know of that may benefit from this testing, any of the symptoms or conditions that they have, keep a total of it, because we're going to be doing a poll after we talk about all the different conditions to see how much food sensitivity testing could be of benefit for you or someone you know, okay? So first, GI issues. I think this is the first area that most of our minds go to in relation to the gut. But as we said, it's just one area. So the other important point here is that all of the conditions that are in bold have a lot of either research or have a lot of clinical findings that food sensitivity testing has been especially beneficial for it. So if you have one of those conditions that are in bold, it's really, really something to consider, all right? So with GI issues, anything from abdominal pain to constipation, diarrhea or loose stools, bloating, belching, inflammatory bowel diseases like Crohn's and ulcerative colitis, irritable bowel syndrome, gallbladder diseases like gallstones, GERD or heartburn, stomach ulcers, and vomiting. So especially with the things like inflammatory bowel disease, Crohn's and ulcerative colitis, we already know that there's a lot of inflammation going on. And one of the key things with really controlling how many attacks of those types of conditions you have is really finding out what your triggers are. And so finding out which foods are causing a lot of the inflammation for you through something like food sensitivity testing, it could really, really be of benefit for those conditions, as well as gallbladder diseases. So something like gallstones, which I've seen quite a bit. The medical term for gallstones is cholecystitis. So cholecystitis. We already talked about this. Anything ending in itis is some sort of inflammation going on systemically, right? And so because of that, that's how you know that food sensitivity testing could be something that could even help with anybody that struggles with something like gallstones, right? Because there's some level of inflammation going on there. Second off, respiratory issues. So this is an area that some may not think, oh, how is the respiratory system correlated to the gut? But the systemic issue that's going on is inflammation. That's what you have to remember, right? So things like asthma, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, or cough, they could all benefit, but especially asthma, because what's happening in the body with asthma is that inflammation causes the inner lining of the airways to swell and produce mucus. And so that's what's happening when you're having a lot of asthma attacks, right? So finding out what some of those food triggers are to help prevent a lot of that inflammation in the airway linings can be really helpful. Ear, nose, and throat conditions. So hoarseness, Meniere's disease. Meniere's is just when you have ringing in the ears, deafness, and vertigo, all three of those things together. Ear infections, sinusitis, sore throat, vertigo. With this one, the thing that stands out to me most is the sinusitis. I've already been seeing a lot of patients with sinusitis issues here. I feel like in Canada, it's very prevalent. Waking up with that sinusitis, it's that latent reaction. So because food sensitivities sometimes are not going to show up right away, it could be a food that you ate 2 days ago that's now flaring up your sinusitis. So sometimes finding out what those food triggers are will really be helpful with something like that. Mood and psychiatric disorders. This one is really interesting because I don't think a lot of people address the gut-brain connection enough. And so really being aware of how some of those food sensitivities, especially the additives that we have in the food, colors, things like that, a lot of things that help preserve foods, so many of those are neurotoxins, and so many of them are throwing off our brain chemistry and leading to a lot of these conditions, right? So anxiety, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADD, autism, irritability, depression, panic attacks, schizophrenia, food sensitivity testing, especially with the autism and ADD, ADHD that we're seeing so often in children now. This testing can really be helpful. There were some studies that really showed how those food additives in a lot of the processed foods or snacks that we give the kids are correlated with a lot of the ADD and ADHD that we're seeing coming up. Right. Then neurological disorders. Again, the gut is the second brain. So those neurotransmitters that are, produced there, it has to do with all these conditions. So epilepsy, migraines, headaches, multiple sclerosis. Food sensitivity testing is really well researched in regards to migraines. If migraines is something that you struggle with, really finding out your triggers is something you probably already know, whether you have environmental triggers or food triggers or other things like that. Finding those out can be so key in preventing migraines. And so this simple test could really be helpful if you're struggling to really pinpoint what it is exactly that's causing some of your migraine flare-ups to happen. Okay, and then skin problems. So with the skin, two things you gotta talk about is the liver and the gut. They both have so much to do with the inflammatory process that's going on, and also just that toxin elimination process, which is so important for healthy skin. So with things like acne, eczema, psoriasis, and urticaria, which is just when you have itchy skin, it's inflammation. The root cause here, a lot of times, is there's inflammation that's happening, and it is expressing itself in the skin. So food sensitivity testing could be very helpful. Then autoimmune issues. Autoimmune issues. I have definitely seen this be of benefit for people. The rheumatoid arthritis, especially. lupus, vasculitis, psoriatic arthritis, really finding out what those triggers are. And as I mentioned earlier on in the presentation, it could be something as simple as those nightshade vegetables, right? Vegetables that you think are, of course, going to be helpful and beneficial to you because you're getting the vitamins and the nutrients and everything you're supposed to from it. But some of those could be causing inflammation specifically for you. And so pinpointing what those triggers may be can be very, very helpful in really keeping down the level of inflammation, especially all the arthritic issues that go along with many of these autoimmune conditions. And then just other conditions like pain, fatigue, brain fog, arthritis, insomnia, obesity, and recurrent infections. With the brain fog, as we were talking about the neurotransmitters, that gut-brain connection is so important, and we so miss out on it that a lot of times people will eat something, like a lot of people will say, those that have celiacs, for example, will say, anytime that I would have bread, I would just not be able to think straight. I couldn't go through my day the way that I was supposed to. I couldn't focus. And that's kind of what brain fog is. So if that's something you think that you may be struggling with, food sensitivity testing could be helpful. The arthritis, itis, we've been talking about that already. Anything ending with that itis is inflammation. And so finding out those triggers, those food sensitivities could be really helpful. And then lastly, obesity, I was just going to talk on, especially obesity in children. There was a study wherein they measured the amount of C-reactive protein, which is an inflammatory marker that's often measured to see how much inflammation is going on in the body, and food sensitivities. And so they saw that CRP and their food sensitivities were both really high with a lot of obese children. So they have a lot of inflammation going on that you can tell in both that C-reactive protein and in their immunoglobulin G. And by eliminating a lot of those foods that were their triggers specifically, their obesity, their weight started to drop off. Right? So if that's something that you struggle with, not only childhood obesity, but adult obesity as well, food sensitivity testing could really be something of benefit for you. Okay, so a lot of conditions. I hope you all have been taking note of how many you or someone you know has been experiencing. And we're just going to do a quick little poll here. All right, so if you have or have ever had 1 to 2 of the conditions mentioned, you can put that in. If you had 3 to 4 of the conditions mentioned, you can put that in. Or if you had 5 or more, you can put that in as well. All right, I'll give everyone a few more seconds to put in their answers. This is really just good information for you to kind of be aware of, what's going on in your body systemically, because some of us may not find or notice the link between a lot of those conditions that you may have. Like you may have a GI issue, you may have a neurological issue, and you may have, acne, right? And you might not see what the common thread with all of them is. But the common thread for many, many, many of these conditions is underlying inflammation, right? So, all right, I'm going to end the poll. So this is really, really good information here. So for those of you with 1 to 2 conditions, it's still something really good to consider. Food sensitivities testing is something really good to consider, especially if it was one of the bolded conditions, because those you've really seen the clinical research and the testing really show to have improvement with. With those with 3 or more of those conditions, we really have a good idea that there's some sort of underlying inflammation going on. And so food sensitivity testing especially would probably be of benefit to you as well. Oh, there were the results for you all to see if you're interested. Great. So moving on, what else can we do this is what I love about naturopathic medicine, okay? There's so many tools that we have in our toolbox. There's so many different ways and routes and things that we can do and tweak and change in our lifestyle and integrate that can really help to see the turnarounds that you want to see with your health. So there's lots that we can do for this. So first off, I just wanted to point out that there are more than just food. There is more than just food sensitivity testing. So for those of you that may have answered, yes, you do have some of these conditions, it's not necessarily going to be a food sensitivity. It could be something like a food intolerance. So I'll talk about that first here. So this image right here is depicting what lactose intolerance looks like. So what lactose intolerance is when you're missing a specific enzyme called lactase. So if you do have lactase, what normally happens is it will take the lactose particles from your things like dairy, milk, cheese, things like that, and break it down into glucose and galactose, which are just forms of sugar that our body can use very easily and readily for energy. It's great. That's what's supposed to happen, so that by the time you're in the colon here, you don't see any more little blue bubbles, which are our lactose particles, because they have been utilized and absorbed by the body the way that they're supposed to. This picture here on the left is what happens when we do not have this lactase enzyme. So what happens is in the small intestine, the lactose particles will come in, and because there isn't that nice enzyme to break it down, it ends up going into our colons. And when it gets there, bacteria in our colon then have to deal with the breakdown of those lactose particles. And when the bacteria handle that situation, it's not pleasant because they release those gases. And that's why you have the symptoms that you have during lactose intolerance, right? So that's a whole other issue on its own. This is not a sensitivity, this is an intolerance. Up here in the top right corner is an image of what happens with celiac disease. So celiac is another type of intolerance, and that's specifically to gluten. So this image right here on the left is what the villi in our gut is supposed to look like. Nice and healthy little flagella poking out like this. The reason why it's shaped and looks like this is because there's so much nice surface area for all of our food particles to then be absorbed and for us to suck in the nutrients and all the good things from our food that we need, right? This image over here on the right is what the lining of your gut looks like with celiac disease. We don't have the nice long flagella poking up because it's been stunted. And that means there's not as much surface area. We're not absorbing the nutrients the way that we're supposed to. We're not getting all the good things from our food that we're supposed to. And that is what's happened. It's a damaged, flattened villi from celiac disease. So those are just two different conditions, which is separate from the food sensitivity testing. Another thing that you can do that I always like to recommend as well as an option is elimination diets, or known as an anti-inflammatory diet as well. This is if, financially you can afford to do the food sensitivity testing quite yet. This is a really great cost-effective way to find out what some of your food sensitivities may be. So what you do is that list of the most common food sensitivities that I mentioned back in about the 6th slide, you eliminate those foods for at least 21 days, up to 28 days if you can. And so that you really give the system enough time to bring down some of the inflammation, calm it down, and get rid of all those things. And then what you do is you reintroduce one food at a time to see if that's something that you react to over the next 2 or 3 days. And you have to remember, you have to do that for about 2 or 3 days for each and every food, because this is a latent long-term immunity reaction that you're looking for. So you're looking to see if your symptoms pop back up essentially over those next 2 days after you've eliminated all these foods and now reintroduced it. So that's a really great way that you can go about seeing if you have certain food sensitivities. All right, so we're now going to talk about the steps to gut healing, before I even talk about it, I'm going to talk about a certain study that I read about, which was really, really interesting. This study followed a group of patients for 10 years. And after the 10 years, they checked the patients, after 10 years of eliminating all of their food sensitivities, they rechecked the patient to see if their gut was improved and if their symptoms had improved and if their health was better overall. All right. So after the 10 years of elimination, sorry, is that my microphone? Okay. All right. So after the 10 years of elimination, what actually only happened is that it halted the progression of their disease, but they actually had the same symptoms, increased malabsorption, and their inflammatory markers were still about the same as 10 years before, when they had just started this elimination process. So that really goes to show that food elimination alone is not necessarily enough to see the improvement in your health and the repair in that gut lining that is necessary to really prevent disease and to even try to help reverse diseases and things like that. So these are the steps that we actually have to do in order to get that change in the gut that we need to see in true healing. So first, you have to remove or kick out the bad. So that's that first step of just food elimination that we've been talking about, and just getting rid of it so that the body can decrease the amount of inflammation overall for a certain amount of time. We also have to do a lot of replacing or bringing in the good. So we're going to talk about some really good gut healing foods that you should be having to really help give the gut lining what it needs to help build back the integrity of it. The third step is to re-inoculate or repopulate that gut environment. So one of the best ways to do that is with our probiotics. As I said, that microbiome environment is so important in regards to especially like our immune system and things like that. So probiotics are so, so important. And then the last step is actually repairing of the gut lining, fixing what's broken. So providing the building blocks that the gut and the digestive system need to be healthy and work properly. So things like enzymes, gut healing, amino acids, lifestyle changes, and proper eating habits is what we're going to talk about. So these are just some really important tools for a healthy gut. First off, learning how to eat properly again. This is just something so simple, but I think that our society has fallen away so much from some of these points that it's just a really good reminder, right? So 40% of our meals in America are actually eaten in a car. That's a large number. Large portions of us usually eat standing up or working on something else, and that means that we're really not digesting our food as well as we could be. Breaking down food takes a lot of energy from our body and a certain hormonal balance as well to allow digestion to occur. So meal times in our environment, our meal times should actually be pretty consistent. We don't want to vary our meal times by more than an hour a day, actually, because when our body is off of its biological rhythm, that's why you'll often see a lot of issues. If you have like a change in time zone, for example, sometimes your gut will just be completely off. And that's the reason why, because your digestive enzymes know when they should be started to secrete. And so that's what really helps with your digestion. And so if you have a time schedule set of when you're supposed to eat, it really helps with the quality of your digestion. All right. Chewing is so critical. And I mean, it's almost laughable because we so don't chew our food or even think about it usually, that it's just an important point to really help increase your digestion. Another thing is adrenal function. So I'm sure in another webinar series as well, I'm going to talk about the adrenals because they are so important, especially in our very highly stressed environment these days, the adrenals have to be addressed. What's really happening is that when our adrenals are off, we're not secreting our digestive enzymes. And often that is what's leading to a lot of our leaky gut issues. When our adrenals are unhealthy, our gut wall is then unhealthy, and we become very hyperreactive to foods. So when you're on vacation, for example, you may experience a decrease in a lot of your food sensitivities. And the reasoning behind that is because when you're relaxed and not in a stressed out state, your gut lining is actually not as inflamed and you don't react to foods in the same way. When your adrenals are hyperreactive, though, your reactivity to a food increases by tenfold, right? So that's why the adrenals are so, so important. In regards to sleep, it's actually really important for our digestion as well, because 1 hour of sleep lost can actually decrease 30% of your immunity, and then you are much more reactive to foods as well. So sleep is really critical. And then lastly, just supplements, as we were sort of talking about in the last slide, things like digestive enzymes, probiotics, amino acids like glutamine can all be really, really helpful in making sure you have a healthy gut. All right, so I said earlier that we're gonna do a little activity. This is the activity. For those of you that it's not too late to put something in your mouth, I understand if it's past some of y'all's cutoff time, I respect that. But if you can, I want you all to get one piece of fruit, either a grape, a strawberry, a blueberry, anything small, or just take one bite of a fruit if you have maybe a banana or something like that, or like a cashew or one nut. Anyways, just one piece or one bite of food. Then what I want you to do is close your eyes and chew that food. And we're gonna chew it for 1 whole minute, okay? I'm gonna set the timer. So I'm gonna give you all some time to go get your food. And I'm gonna start the timer soon, okay? Great. And then what you're gonna do then is tell me what you notice about the food. Take note of the smell, the flavor, the sweetness, the consistency of the food. And you're gonna write in the chat box after a minute what you noticed, all right? So talking about some of those anti-inflammatory foods that can be really good for your gut health and the gut lining and really making sure that it's not inflamed are some of these things. So whole, organic, minimally processed foods, non-GMO things, preferentially if you can, are all best. There's been a lot of studies on a lot of the genetically modified foods. They're just not as nutrient dense as organic foods. So that's one of the main pushes for why you should really try to buy organic as much as you can. And then also just the effects of a lot of the pesticides and herbicides. Those are toxins and those are chemicals that our liver has to detox from and eliminate and deal with. And so it just is not as easy for the system when you have all those additional things to have to worry about. So plant-based, vegan, if you can, and properly, 50 to 80% organic raw foods are really best. Short therapeutic fasting. I really love intermittent fasting. I think it really gives the body that digestive rest that it needs, really giving the body time to digest your food properly and eliminate properly. It's really, really helpful. As well, just dark leafy greens. Dark leafy greens are vital for our health. They have so many of the vitamins and minerals and protein that we need. A really interesting point that I learned about the other day was just, we're so worried about the type of water that we drink a lot of the times, but because the minerals in our water don't have the protein as well, you're not actually absorbing the minerals as effectively from water. Minerals need protein for the body to absorb it effectively. And one of the best things to get that from is your dark leafy greens, because they have that protein, they have all those minerals as well. So you're really absorbing those nutrients. Seaweeds. Microalgae like spirulina and chlorella, those are really, really great, not only for inflammation, but also just for your thyroid gland as well. So yeah. Well, quercetin. Quercetin is found in things like apples, peppers, dark cherries and berries, cruciferous vegetables. The cruciferous vegetables are so, so great. Your broccoli, cabbage, Brussels sprouts, things like that are all cruciferous. Leafy green veggies, citrus fruits, tomatoes, all contain quercetin. All right, can you mute your mic, please? Thank you. Also turmeric. Turmeric is such a great anti-inflammatory food. We've been seeing it so popular lately, especially because it has a lot of immune regulatory properties as well. So turmeric is great, ginger is great as well, and then sulfur-containing amino acids and compounds that are found in like garlic, onion, cabbage, kale, broccoli, Brussels sprouts. So I feel like I've been repeating green leafy vegetables and cruciferous vegetables a lot because they do so, so much and have so many properties to them. All right, then last but not least, these anti-inflammatory nutrients are B vitamins. I really love always doing B vitamins as a B complex because a lot of them work together and a certain amount of all the different B vitamins to work properly. Vitamins A, C, D, and E are all great anti-inflammatory nutrients. Your minerals like zinc, selenium, copper, iron, and magnesium. Omega-3s. Omega-3s are so, so important for not only just inflammation in the gut, but also for our brain health, for our heart health. Omega-3s are great. Fiber. Last but not least, water. Water is excellent because it really helps clear out and help that liver with a lot of the detoxification that it needs to do, and yeah, help bring down inflammation. All right, anybody whose mic is not muted, can you please mute your mic? Thank you. All right. And last but not least, I just wanted to tell you about some of the things that we have coming up at Integrative Interactive Health. But first, actually, let's do our activity. So whoever has done the activity, go ahead and put in the chat what your findings were after chewing that food up. Let's see. Okay, all had some answers here. If anyone has done the activity, they can put their answers in there. I know I did the activity just in by myself before the presentation, and I noticed the sweetness of the food again. That was just very eye-opening, you know, how sweet foods really are. I had a cashew nut. I tasted the sweetness and the crunchiness. Right, so things like a nut, you don't think of it necessarily being sweet, but when you chew it up enough, yeah, it gets sweeter and sweeter. It's so true. So, so true. Great. Thank you guys so much for participating in the activity. Love it. All right, so yes, you can keep your comments coming and I'll kind of talk about some of the things we have coming up. So for November, we have our food sensitivity testing program. So what that involves is you would be pretty much coming in for an evaluation visit with me. We would go through kind of your background to do a little history intake, specifically towards the food sensitivity testing. Then I would give you your lab requisition to go to your nearest life labs to go and get the testing done. And once your results are received, then I'll call you and we come back for the review appointment, essentially, where we go over what our plan is going forward. So we'll talk about, you know, what your food sensitivities were, how we're going to do our elimination and reintroduction process. And also I'd cater whatever supplements specifically you need for your conditions with that plan as well. So that's something that you can sign up for at our clinic, the food sensitivity testing program. You can book your appointment and mention that specifically, and we'll get you booked in. Also for November, we are doing a newsletter or blog post essentially. And so we really want you guys to check that out on our website. We'll have a blog post every so often up on our website, just some really great health information that you all can read about. For December, we're planning our 21-day cleanse program. So as I mentioned before, for those that can't do the food sensitivity testing, we do the elimination process. And throughout the elimination process, then we're also going to reintroduce the foods afterwards to see which ones may be causing some of our symptoms. So we're going to do that together starting December 1st. We also have our next talk, which is going to be just a naturopathic medicine intro and Q&A. So for those of you that are on today, or for those that weren't able to come and you just have questions about what exactly naturopathic medicine is, how can it help me, that's what our next talk is going to be about pretty much. So that's going to be on Sunday, December 12th at 6 p.m. So you can mark your calendars with that. And in the office, we have really high quality, high grade supplements that we offer, either online or in office. You can purchase them as well. And we're going to be offering an immune support package. So if you want to get some really good quality supplements to boost you through the winter months, especially, you can come in or talk to us about that. And then for January, we have our detox from December. We all know how it goes at Christmas time and the holidays. So this is going to be actually a juice cleanse program that I'll let you all sign up for. You can put in your orders ahead of time and come and pick up your pre-made juices for us to do a 3-day juice cleanse after the holidays. All right. And in January as well, a lot of people do Veganuary. So we're going to be doing Veganuary together. It's a part of the integrative interactive medicine. We want to be making these health changes together, right? So with Veganuary, we're all going to take the challenge to really integrate more plant-based, whole, vegan meals into our diet. So if you can go the entire month of January as a vegan, see how it changes your health, see if you like it, and maybe it'll become a whole lifestyle change for you, you know? And then lastly, we are going to be doing something called Sister Doc Talks. So I'm very, very excited with this. It's going to be a Instagram live video, most likely over our social media platform, wherein me and Dr. Tanisha Mitchell-Lambert will be talking about different ways that we collaborate in medicine and ways that we can work with patients and work with each other and work with the medical field to really have a more integrated model and really make sure that our patients are getting the best care possible. So just really realizing that both of our medicines have its strengths and its weaknesses, right? So conventional medicine has areas that naturopathy could be very helpful in, and naturopathy has areas that conventional medicine would be much better with. So just working together more seamlessly and united, we truly believe gives the best healthcare. So you can look out for all of those things on our social media. And this is the most exciting part. For those that are not on Instagram, I'm sorry, you might have not seen this, but we did actually have a special giveaway going on. And that giveaway was for a free gift certificate to get a treatment done at our office. And you get to choose between one of the 3 treatments that I offer at the office, which are acupuncture, cupping, and constitutional hydrotherapy. And so if you liked and shared and followed us on Instagram, you got an entry into this giveaway. So if you're not following us on Instagram, go ahead and do that now. But I'm going to tell us who the winner is. There's all the participants, if you all can see that. And the winner is... it's Odessa Gill. And so Odessa Gill, if you are watching tonight, you get to pick up your gift certificate to come in and get a free treatment. And I'll also put this up on Instagram as well. All right, so I know it's 7 o'clock. This is exactly when I was planning to end, but if anyone has pressing questions, I'll go ahead and take some questions. But for those that can't stay back, you can feel free to exit. This is the end of the presentation. But if you are interested in keeping up to date on all the things we have coming up, leave your email address privately to me.
I'll call you back. I'm on a Zoom set.
Sorry?
I have a question.
Okay, yes, sir. 1 second. So if you
Question
do,
to the chat.
yes, okay. I'm gonna answer the chat questions. Yes. So if you do want to be added to the distribution list, you can leave your email in a private message to me, or you can go to our website right here and contact us there as well. All right, so I'll put that information up while I answer some of these questions. Is there an over-the-counter device we can buy to test our food triggers or food sensitivities, or a prescribed device to test food triggers and sensitivities? So no, with food sensitivities, it's a blood test. I prefer the one that Life Labs does because it's the most reliable one here in Canada. If you have come into contact with other ones, I'm not sure of the efficacy of how accurate those results may be if you have seen them, but I'm not aware of any over-the-counter ones that you can purchase to find out food sensitivities. It's pretty much through Life Labs or RMA, Rocky Mountain Association, they work with as well. What are prebiotics? So prebiotics are the food for your probiotics. So it's a way to feed the probiotics so that the probiotics work even better. That's pretty much what a prebiotic is. Okay. Any other questions?
I'm sorry, my question about the prebiotics.
Yes.
It's as when I say what about prebiotics, I mean we can take probiotics, and what about prebiotics? Can that also help, or does it counteract?
You can take a prebiotic and probiotic mix, definitely. What's most important with the whole probiotic conversation is how much you're getting, like how many CFUs, and then also the strains of the bacteria that you're using to repopulate. Those are really the two most important variables when you're talking about probiotics. Prebiotics are like a good additional step, but if you're not getting the strains right, and if you're not getting the right amount, then you're not going to get the benefit from the probiotics that you need.
So what's the strength that we need then?
Your strains are dependent on your condition. So for certain conditions,
okay.
it differs. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
And did you say you were in Canada?
Yes, I am. I'm in Mississauga.
Oh.
Yes. So I do virtual appointments depending on the condition. As long as it's not something where I need to do a physical exam on you, for example. Yes, I do virtual appointments.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, no problem. Okay, great. Do these programs cater to international? Okay, so the programs, that's an interesting question. I haven't thought about whether or not to cater it internationally or just locally here. Let me get back to you. YL, make sure you send me your email address and just send that question specifically to me as well so that I can remember to answer you, okay?
A lot of us in the USA, so I don't know how we're gonna get products.
I'm licensed in Arizona still this year, and I should be renewing my license as well, hopefully by next year, but yes, if that's the case, and depending on the state that you're at, I can actually do virtual appointments still.
Well, when you say pick up some products.
Yeah, there's a virtual store as well that you can purchase things. So if that's your case, send me an email and I will talk to you about that.
All right, thank you.
All right, great. Yes, so yes, this is recorded. Okay, so someone asked about GERD and reflux. Okay, so with GERD and reflux, yes, food sensitivity testing can be very helpful with that. Finding out what those triggers are, because you probably already know the most common GERD foods that you should try to avoid, like spicy foods or really acidic things that can really flare it up. But if you're still having that persistent GERD, that's why finding out some of those food sensitivities may be helpful as well. Does it matter if, okay, so question, does it matter if they are in tablet form or liquid form? So it depends on the supplement. It completely depends on what supplement you're talking about. As far as absorption goes, sometimes tablet form is just fine. It really isn't going to make much of a difference. But liquid form, generally speaking, usually is a little bit more easily absorbed. But then there's another variable you have to consider is what form that liquid form is in. So what type of magnesium you're taking, for example, because magnesium can be bound to a bunch of different types of things, but what form is it in, right? So that affects the level of absorption even more so than if it's in tablet or liquid form. So that's something to consider. Okay. And the leaky gut. Someone asked, what about leaky gut? Leaky gut, I'm probably going to do a whole lecture on that on its own. So stay tuned for that. So for the YouTube channel, it's going to be I2 Health, I believe, on YouTube, or I2 Health Clinic on YouTube. Can we be taking or making our own kombucha or kefir drink or buying one? Yeah, I love kombucha and kefir are all great forms of probiotic. Definitely a great way to integrate some good probiotics into your lifestyle. Yes, I2 Health on YouTube. That is our YouTube page. So that is where this will be posted. If that's everyone's questions, thank you. Thank you again so much for joining us. And I look forward to seeing you all again at our next talk. Have a great evening, everyone.
Thank you.